Well, apparently we are live again. Searching for Sparks. I'm Tim Motzer, and today I'm really excited to have one of my closest and dearest friends, Anthony Tidd, aboard the ride today, Searching for Sparks. And we're going to be getting into all kinds of stuff. Of course, many of you know Anthony, but incredible bassist, composer, improviser. A lot of you may know his work with The Roots. The work with Steve Coleman for years and years and years, his production of people like Zap Mama, Ursula Rucker, and on and on and on. So without further ado, let's get this thing going. I'm welcoming in Anthony Tidd. Ant, can I hear you? I don't hear you. Uh-oh. Let's see what's going on here. I see you though, and I hope people can hear us. Are you there? I still don't hear you, I'm afraid. Do you hear me at all? You hear me? Okay. Stand by, everybody.
Okay, you should hear me now.
There you are. And do you hear me still?
I still hear you. Okay, we're good.
This is all about what live is about. I'm going to go back to my microphone, see if that's any better. Still hearing me?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, great. So here we are. Take one. And Anthony, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm in a good place, I think. Post the mayhem of the pandemic.
Yeah,
I'm doing good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I do want to talk about that a little bit. You know, it's like we're all just coming out of this, especially in Philly, not everywhere around the world though. But you know, Philly is just being outside the last few days, a lot of the businesses are really changing up, and the no mask has been lifted, and you know, we're seeing what's happening around this town. But you know, it's like, what was your, you know, we talked over the lockdown, but what was your experience, and how did you get through it?
Well,
it was a crazy one.
I mean, it was literally like a movie.
Yeah.
I guess the first thing is, I was sick before the lockdown actually happened.
Right.
You know, as so many people have said, I believe I had COVID because I got sicker than I've ever been in my life. Like,
that was like in December, right?
That was actually in February.
Oh, February.
Yeah, and I went to, you know, it was serious enough that I went to the emergency room, and they did all these tests on me, you know, because I actually thought I was having a heart attack or something. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I went and saw my doctor, and then my doctor had me go over to the emergency room down the street. Went there, they did tests on me for about 6 hours, found nothing. And we're just like, yeah, you're fine. Go home, you know. And then I went home and was the sickest I've ever been for 10 days. I mean, wow. Yeah, couldn't breathe at night. Was having like really serious stomach problems. Really insane headaches, pressure, sinus pressure, just crazy stuff. And then I recovered from that after about 10 days. And then I think I went out and enjoyed myself for maybe 4 days, and then a lockdown happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, at the time, no one knew. No one had any idea what COVID was at the time. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we were all locked down, and I know you did a lot of amazing things, one being Act for Music.
Right. Yeah, so I was locked down and stuck in my apartment in Harlem And then after like the fourth day of just being stuck there, I was actually talking with my friend Dimitri, who lives in Paris, Dimitri Louis. And, you know, I was just like, Dimitri, I've got this idea. We're going to do a festival. And he was like, okay, yeah, man. And, you know, Dimitri is an absolute wizard at website programming and all of that scope of things, you know, a wizard. And so, yeah, we literally brainstormed for like, you know, a week, and then we worked super hard for like 2 weeks. And at the end of that 2 weeks, we had an entire platform built.
Wow.
Which became Act for Music. And then I started reaching out to all of my friends and their friends. And then we built this festival, which ended up having, well, I had these numbers memorized, but now I forget what they are. But it's something like 280 artists.
Yeah.
Over, it was like 48 days of music over 8 weeks or something. It was like, you know, just it was insane. Yeah. And in some ways it was really great. You know, people were having a really, especially the musicians, they were having a very hard time.
Yeah.
Just not being able to perform, or their tours were getting canceled. Many of them were locked down. They were super depressed, and just didn't know whether the world was going to continue. And so just to have that little outlet for them during that time was really important. And so, you know, it started out as this crazy idea, and then it became a mission. You know, oh man, we got to keep this going. So then, you know, I think we started off saying it would be 4 weeks, and then we were like, no, we need to make it 8 weeks. You know, and then the real the biggest problem we had was just finding any kind of support from the press. For some reason, the press
It's so strange.
The press just did not care. I was like, do you understand that there are 280 artists, and some of them are from Nigeria, South Africa, Switzerland, Germany, like it's the entire world.
Yeah.
How do you not want to talk about this? I didn't get it, but
yeah. I still don't get it, and I didn't get it then, and it was a worldwide thing, and I've never seen anything of that scope, actually. Right. You know, and especially at that time, it was like such a ray of light, you know, and yeah, I'll never understand that one.
Yeah, it's like, I think in 3 years' time, except for the people that participated in it, maybe no one will know it ever happened. Do you know what I mean? Which is kind of a real crime. But anyway, the point is that what that made me realize is just how the internet and the networking technology we have can really be leveraged to bring together like vast and disparate communities of musicians.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You know, I mean, there was so much desire there from people in different areas to just, you know, break the boundaries of their particular scene and you know, attract people who are in different regions. You know? And so, yeah, I was very, very happy to be involved in that. I mean, I also had some really great volunteers who helped me, and they worked like so hard. I mean,
yeah,
no sleep for like, you know, 5 weeks or something. It was crazy.
And you know, that thinking back to that time, because you know, this week I was talking to someone just about the early days of lockdown. We really didn't know what was going to happen. We still don't in some ways, but we're not locked down now. But back then it was like, wow, how long are we going to be locked down? And you know, how are we going to make it through? You know, and there were all these crazy questions. So the beautiful thing is so many people came together, you know, and I think that was one of the feelings that came up during COVID, is like there was a unity that started happening that I hadn't seen in a while, you know,
right.
Or if ever, you know, people crossing boundaries or strange walls and stuff, and just like, we're all together, man, you know.
Absolutely.
And that was a beautiful thing that came out of this, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mean, for me, it gave me a deeper perspective on the world and how things, work and how so many of us are just basically just allowing our lives to pass us by, and not really paying attention to the things that are really important in the world, And if that wasn't enough, so you had the pandemic,
yeah,
and then on the heels of the pandemic, you had the whole George Floyd, Black Lives Matter protests that were literally happening in every corner of the world.
Yes.
I mean,
and that was just a year ago, right?
Yeah, it's unbelievable to think it was. Yeah, I mean, I remember getting on my scooter and riding to Center City and just seeing 3 police cars on fire and a crowd of 500 people running that way and police chasing them with batons running that way. I mean, it was insane.
I remember that day. Yeah, that was a crazy day. And, I did some of the same things as there were continued marches and stuff. I rode my bicycle down and rode through a march and did that on Broad Street one day. And it was just to see everybody coming out. And this march was a very peaceful march. I think there were so many elements of the early stuff that it makes you wonder.
Right.
But here we are. When we talk about the BLM and stuff like that, it's like I just watched a film about Bob Dylan the other day that came up called No Direction Home. And it was quite interesting to me because it was kind of a history of folk music in America in a way, and, Bob Dylan's rise came up through protest song and the protest movement. And I'm thinking, wow, 1963, 64, all these poets, Bob Dylan, singer-songwriters, Martin Luther King, everybody's on the steps of the White House. I'm like, how long ago was that? And we're still here, right?
Right.
And it was shocking to me to kind of see what everybody was being vocal about in the 60s. Right. And, I grew up during that time. I remember it all so well. And yet we're in we're in the same time, that MLK talked about back then, and here we are. And it's like, I still feel so much hope that we are moving forward, but music is one of those things getting all the way back that brings everybody together. And that's one of the things that you did with Act for Music, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, my view on that particular subject that you were talking about right there is that the Western world has been due for a change for a very long time. In terms of the method of social organization that we're dealing with, in terms of the financial system, in terms of how wealth is distributed, in terms of freedoms and all of those kind of things. It's been due for an update for a very, very long time. But I believe that because the existing system makes money and keeps certain people comfortable, right? It hasn't been able to just make it over that crest to where that change starts happening. Do you know what I'm saying? In other words, I believe the reason why we're still dealing with the same issues today that Martin Luther King and people like him, actually people 50 years before him were trying to overcome.
Absolutely.
Is because of how lucrative the present system of capitalism is. I mean, though it's not good for everybody, there's enough people who are powerful who sit at the top that make sure that it continues. And that system it goes hand in hand with the same kind of systems that create racism, police violence, and all of the kind of things that people are protesting, wars. It's all the same pot.
And because that hasn't changed, it remains the same.
Exactly. But I'm saying it's not. What I'm trying to say is that so from so many people's point of view, it doesn't change because of human nature, or it doesn't change because of happenstance. But I'm saying that's not actually true. It doesn't change because there is an active force that is keeping it going.
Yeah.
And that is because we live in a world where the dollar is king, and where everything is about how to get money, how to keep your money once you get it, how to leverage your money, to get more power, and that inherent in that particular way of thinking in that system are all the issues that we're talking about, from sexism to racism to, basically anti-freedom machineries, that manifest in the issues that we have today.
We've seen the power of music over, the course of our lives,
Mhm.
and we've seen it used in such positive ways to help create change. Where are we right now, do you think, with music in that state of being, especially coming out of lockdown and, having a new president on board and just trying to move forward? How is music? How can music play a role now?
My particular point of view is that many of the most progressive people in any society have always been artists. So in other words, the people who were always at the forefront of civil liberties and freedom and human rights and all of those kinds of things, were always artists. Artists were always made up a large number of those people, and so I do believe that art has a tremendous ability to transform and bring people together, right? I mean, there are people who cannot agree on anything except the fact that they both love Beethoven.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about, people who come from cultures that have hated each other for thousands of years can still agree, well, we both love Bach, we both love Beethoven, or we both love Coltrane,
Yeah.
we both love James Brown. They can agree on those things, and that's the power of art and music. It transcends our day-to-day bullshit.
Pretty much.
You know what I'm saying? And it gets to the heart of what's really important. And so art has always brought people together. It just has. I mean, whether you're talking about, and I'm being very broad when I talk about art, whether you're talking about music, whether you're talking about carpentry, whether you're talking about cooking, do you know what I'm saying? Whether you're talking about dance, this is a thing that these things transcend, and they bring people together. They allow people to see the humanity in other people, because it's like, oh, well, I appreciate this, and I feel that this is really part of what makes me a human. It makes me who I am, and this person can also appreciate this. So maybe they're more like me than I thought they were. Maybe we have more in common. Anyway, all that to say that I do believe that is why art is not in control of the common person, the common man, right? It's controlled by the rich, the wealthy, and institutions, which are set up by those people, and so to a certain extent, the more creative and the more beneficial elements of the arts are harder to come by, right? You would think that if art is for everyone and art is a great thing, then you can find it everywhere, and you can find the positive and creative aspects of art everywhere, you know. But you can't. If you just take the music industry as a microcosm of the art world, 99% of it is just garbage.
Yeah.
You know.
And then it also makes me to think about, you know, well, even thinking about painting or something, street art, right? Which we see all around in every city we go to, and graffiti and just beautiful artwork, where people who cannot get into the particular high society aspect of art,
Right.
dude, that doesn't stop anyone. And actually, I think that's where all the real stuff begins. It begins with punk music in a way. It begins in people's basement playing in jazz groups and putting together something new. Begins with painting on walls. You
Right.
know?
Right.
Fashion is that way, you know, cooking is that way. And
Right.
and all that stuff, as you're saying, transcends the commercialized aspect of art, I guess is what
Right.
we're talking about in a way, the monetized aspect of art.
Right. But artists have to survive. And
Absolutely.
so and so if there are gatekeepers, if you want to use that word, that prevent certain kinds of artists from being able to get to a certain level, then that's a sort of way of regulating
Yeah.
the power of art, if you like.
Yeah, I definitely get that.
Do you know what I mean?
I do.
You know, also, if you look at the role of art for many people, it's about, for many people, art is about celebrating their culture.
Yeah.
And also enshrining their culture and making sure that it persists and it lives on.
Mm-hmm.
So art has been used within our society as an extension of white supremacy.
Yeah.
Right? Because the arts institutions that have the most resources, that are doing that, you know, that are able to broadcast art on the highest levels, you know, they're very intrinsically tied to orchestras. Do you know what I'm saying? Or you know, or 19th century classical art, you know, or you know, ballet or opera, and all of these things, which lift up European society in a way that European society doesn't even do. I mean, I'm talking about in the US.
That's right.
You know.
Yeah.
Europe is actually in many ways more progressive with its art than the US, because the US is kind of using European art as a way to remain European. You know, and so they're using, like, you know, the most typical forms of it. And they're almost trying to pursue, you know, what art in Europe was, you know, 200 years ago or something, because they feel that keeps them connected to that side of it, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, one thing that has really changed that is what we're doing right now. The internet has given the average artist a platform so they can reach people and at least be heard, you know. You know, I guess back in the day, you had the Loft scene in New York. You know, you had like grassroots concerts that popped up, you know, that people would do, you know, in the punk scene. And, you know, that in those days, those were kind of their attempts of trying to break that and trying to make a place for what they were doing within the art world, you know. But now you have the internet, and, you know, so in many ways, what happened with Act for Music was almost an extension of that kind of thing.
Totally.
Of trying to create a platform, you know, where anyone could create what they wanted to do and have it heard, you know.
It was a global loft.
Global Loft. That's a great name, dude. You should take that.
But it was, you know, and that
Global
is
Loft.
That's a great idea, though. You know, the idea of a loft community. You know, I think that's still happening. And, you know, I think about West Philly, like they just did the Porch Festival or something, and you know, all those porches up around Clark Park, all these musicians were on porches of different houses, and
Right.
you could just stroll down the street and hear all kinds of amazing stuff. And
Absolutely.
I love these kinds of things that have been coming together outside, because, you know, you can't go inside yet. And that's starting to change. But you know, there's been some really clever ones just being outdoors. There was just a modular festival on Kelly Drive, I believe. And, you know, people with modular synthesizers came out and
Seriously?
yeah, and they put down like you know,
Wow.
like beach blankets and stuff all around the park, and an audience showed up, and each artist played their modular, you know, just laying on the grass, really, you know, grass, talking about
Wow.
grassroots. And that happened, you know, modular in
Wow.
the park, I think it was called, but I could be wrong on that.
Oh
But I'm
man,
just
you're
seeing
killing.
like these really great community efforts of just getting people together and let's do this. And you know, the artists always figure it out, like some new way of getting out there and, you know, bypassing the venues. And, you know, like, because usually you know, you and I have had this talk for years. We're never really too thrilled about a lot of the venues that we play in. And, you know, uh, how we can move forward with that. And, you know, you're a curator as well. So, you know, that's one of the things that I'm interested in as you curated Act for Music. Like, what are you thinking about, you know, moving forward in 21 and 22? Are you actively seeking to curate still?
Yes, yes, I am.
Great.
I'm looking for alternative ways to do it though. You know, the traditional model is that as a curator, you're part of some institution. That institution gives you money, and then you can use that money to curate art. You know, essentially, I'd see curation as it's kind of scene building.
Yeah.
You know, if you as a curator, someone gives you $50,000 and you can put on X amount of shows over X amount of time, what you're really doing is creating a scene for
Yeah.
whatever that thing is. If you're consistent in what you're creating, you know, and you know, people like Orrin Evans, who has who has his
The porch series.
patio.
Yeah, patio. Yeah.
Yeah, club patio. You know, that's the same kind of thing. You know, he's creating a scene.
That's right.
And various other people. You know, so yeah, I'm really interested in coming at curation from that angle, and I'm finding that the traditional institution approach, it's too restrictive. You know, I find that the bigger institutions, they have too many conflicting goals with the kind of curation I want to do. So I'm looking at ways to create pop-ups and ways to create, you know, venues that are not typically venues, you know,
site-specific places.
Yeah, and so the way I'm looking at that, you know, one thing that became very apparent to me during the pandemic was the difference in the way that different areas of society were valued and treated in the face of the pandemic. So, for instance, you know, the pandemic affected everything; it affected all of our social activities, and one of the ways it affected us was that we couldn't go out to eat anymore, right? Which for some people, for us, you know, was a big part of our social, the way we expressed ourselves and lived socially, right?
Yeah.
And it also had a huge effect on the restaurant industry, you know, because if we couldn't go out to eat anymore, they couldn't make money.
Yeah.
And so the restaurant industry, as soon as that went down, I mean, within weeks or months, they went on into hard lobby mode. And they lobbied the city, to the different cities, to allow them to build outside dining areas, you know, which I've got to say is one of the most beautiful things that has ever happened in America.
I totally agree.
I mean, it overnight, it transformed these cities, which were essentially just roadways with like houses and stuff. It transformed them into like communities, you know,
Yeah.
but by having these outside areas where people could eat and drink and all that kind of stuff, you know. And so even looking at Philadelphia and right now, in some ways it's the most vibrant it's been.
I agree. You
since
know,
I've lived there.
I was talking to a gentleman yesterday about this very fact, and it's like, you know, one of the greatest things that happened, you know, is exactly what you just said. People build out into the streets, and some of these places really made some ornate buildings and had incredible ideas. And you know, I'm sure you agree with this too. It reminded me of like anytime I've gone to Europe and you stroll through these cities, and they're all based on outdoors, you know, eating and sitting and
Absolutely.
cafes and all that stuff. And there would still be, you know, the restaurant inside, but generally the people would be outside, you know, it's summertime or whatever. And
Yeah.
and then I felt like I read something just recently from our great city of Philly that was saying like, you know, the outdoor thing has got to end or something.
Yeah.
I don't. They're trying to stop what's happening.
Yes.
Which is actually such a positive thing.
Yes.
Especially going into the summertime. You know.
Yeah.
Exactly. It should really continue. So I mean, I think that's once again just a terrible idea.
well, so there's another point I'm going to make, but before I make that, I want to do a comparison. You know, a lot of the more progressive cities around the world, right? They're doing the opposite. In fact, they've been doing the opposite for around about 10 years.
Yeah.
They've been trying to get cars and roadways outside of their cities, right? Because they've seen the negative impact that having all of these roads and throughways has on the actual community and the you know, the city. And they've been, a lot of them have been trying to make, even though it's a large city, they've been trying to make it more like a small town, you know, where there's areas where people walk without having to worry about crossing streets or cars or any of that other kind of stuff. And they've invested more in their public transportation systems so that more people can get around without having to use a car. And they've added rules where you can't bring your car into the city. You have to leave your car on the outside and then take public transport into the city. Unless you're like a vendor or something, you got to drop something off, you know.
Such a progressive idea.
Right. So, you know, Barcelona has that.
Parts of London, I think.
London has that. Parts of Paris have that. You know, parts of Berlin have that, you know. And they're trying to strike this balance between roadways and public areas, right? So, to a certain extent, Philadelphia is an example of a city that has actually done the opposite historically, right? Back in the day when Philadelphia had an opportunity to develop a public transportation system, and it started to develop its public transportation system, it aborted that because of the car. You know, and instead of creating a vast network of subways and all of that kind of stuff like New York has, they opted to have a very limited transportation system, but more roads, so people can get around in the city. And for all kinds of reasons, with I guess the most important one being climate change. You know what I'm saying? Like cities are having to rethink how they approach public transportation, people getting around, and that whole balance between you know, roadways and public areas. And so, I mean, these restaurants have really have forced the city to really reckon with that, but on a grassroots level, not on a city planning level, but a grassroots level.
Yeah.
Anyway, my whole point for bringing that up was to point out the difference in what happened with music and what happened with the restaurant industry. Music was also affected because all the music venues had to close down, which meant there was nowhere for musicians to play, right?
Yeah.
One would have thought that music would have moved outside. Why wouldn't it have moved outside, right? Why didn't musicians, in the same way that restaurants constructed outside dining areas, why didn't musicians construct outside performance areas? Why? Why on every street where there's like 7 restaurants who've all been permitted to take over the roadway and create these dining areas, why isn't there a stage on every street? Why?
That's a
You know,
beautiful idea.
do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I've heard stories about some of my students who would they created a band, like a roaming brass band,
Yeah.
that would basically walk through the Rittenhouse Square area playing marching band music.
Yeah.
New Orleans type stuff, right?
Yeah.
And they were cited on a number of times by the police.
It's so crazy.
So here you have all these restaurants in Rittenhouse Square, which are completely taken over the street. And this is beautiful spread of people eating outside and enjoying themselves. And then you have a marching band, of musicians going through that area, playing and performing to the people. But then you have the police ticketing the band.
It's so nuts.
But it's a perfect example of the way that the city has responded to artists, the restaurant industry. They have completely turned their back on artists and done nothing for them.
Well, that's historical too, though, isn't it? If we talk of the great music history of Philadelphia, that would be a true statement, I think.
Yes. I mean, look at it. You have all these institutions in Philly, right? And they have, because they're nonprofits, most of them, they have all these statements for the arts, or, I won't go into into their various statements, but they're all some lofty thing that, some focus group came up with, which basically says something like, we're here for you, we're preserving the arts, and we're all about. So, but what did they do during the pandemic? The pandemic happened. The artist community was suffering. What did they do for them? Nothing. They just closed their doors and said, "We'll see you on the other side." Hopefully, do you know what I'm saying?
Pretty much. Yeah.
And the city did the same. I mean, there are some people that are trying to change that. In particular, there's the Arts and Culture Task Force that are created a grant for musicians and artists, and the work they're doing is good, but it's literally a band-aid on a gaping wound.
Yeah, and that's limited by the city too in some ways, right?
It's limited by the amount of money they have. Yeah, I think they got something like $1 million for to split amongst every artist in the city who applied. And it's great. Like I said, it's great work, and it's very, very needed, but it's just not enough.
Yeah.
If you combine the incomes of every artist in the Philadelphia area over the course of 1 year, I think it's going to come up to way more than $1 million.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah,
I think it will come up to more than $10 million. I think it will come up to more than $50 million. Do you know what I'm saying? So $1 million to address, to bring the arts back is, I mean, it's just crazy. But anyway, I mean, it's a beginning, but more work needs to be done like that. And I really want to see, the city do more to help musicians who basically just want to be treated even a little bit like the restaurant industry was.
Yeah.
Like, build a few stages, man. Like, just do 10.
Yeah.
10 stages and allow, give them a little budget each and allow people to pay on them,
Especially when you're talking summertime, good weather. Like, I have so many memories, again, going back to Europe of traveling and touring and being somewhere and playing a festival and just seeing, city stages all over the place. Mm-hmm. And people would be playing everywhere and people would be sitting outside and there was always music somewhere. And it was like, wow, what a beautiful vibe this is, And we could have this here. I love the idea of certain streets being closed down, like you mentioned, like 2nd Street and places like that, where there could be a stage outside. And I think you mentioned that many times before. Like, could you imagine the city, with musicians playing, in all these areas, and
right.
it's great. It's a great way to find the listeners, and it's a great way for the listeners to find these amazing artists. And
Right.
there's a real disconnect, I think, in the city. It's like,
Right.
where do we play?
And it's not only about, I don't want to give this idea that it's about art and the lofty goals of art, although, I am that guy. I believe in creativity and all the rest of that stuff. Yeah, sure. But it's not only about that. It's about money, tourism. What?
Well, think about New Orleans,
Right. What the impact that 20 years of not supporting your artists has on a city's tourism is great.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
There are people who would come here only to enjoy the art and for no other reasons. You think about it, when you go to Paris,
from all over the world to come to Philly. Yeah.
Yeah. When you go to Paris, right? When you go to London, when you go to Barcelona, when you go to Berlin and or anywhere, any of those kind of places, New Orleans, it's a very large part of why you're going there is the culture. And that culture
absolutely
is the food, it's the music, it's the art, it's all these other things, It's not really it's not the roads. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not all the stuff that we seem to focus on here. It's not
not the new condominiums.
No, it's not the condominiums. That's not the reasons why people want to go to a city. Or even want to live in a city.
Yeah.
What good is it having luxury condos, right, if there's no art?
If all the artists have been chased away and can't even afford to be there anymore,
Right. Yeah. Anyway.
But it's interesting traveling through these ideas and kind of just illuminating them for a minute, because it's a great topic that will be continued long after we finish this conversation. That's for sure. But,
absolutely.
I think this kind of discourse, though, creates positive motion and ideas that can turn into reality, and we just have to figure these out. So anyway, swinging all the way back into your curation, I look forward to seeing what comes up and what you find, because you've done the sitting in thing for how many years now at the Kimmel Center?
I did it for 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing for the community of Philadelphia. And
yeah.
And it's like, as we keep spiraling backwards in time, you're sitting in your recording studio, Tidbit Sonus, I believe it's called, right?
Yes.
And it's great to see it. I've been there quite a few times, and a lot of people know this, but I'm just going to bring this up because you have always been in a studio, and ever since I've met you. Mm-hmm. Which, who knows when that was? Probably in the 90s, I guess, right? Was it the 90s?
Maybe late 90s, yeah.
I'm trying. The famous story is we played a session with Music Soul Child,
right?
And that's when we met. You came in with your bass on, and I was in there with my pedals and the guitar, and we were doing the track. And you're like, "Hey, man, what's up?" And I think we did a first take.
Yeah.
But, you had a studio down the hallway. You've been working. And still do, I believe, with the Roots, and you were producing a lot of albums at that period of time. I remember, of course, Ursula's albums. You did 2 of Ursula Rucker's albums, and Zap Mama, and just a whole bunch of stuff. And I was wondering if you could just talk about, I know there's a longer backstory, but what got you into production in the first place, and creating? I guess it was a natural growth out of writing and recording, right?
Well, to be very honest, the only reason why I learned to play instruments, well, I mean, obviously I was so young that I wasn't thinking about why I'm doing it. But, looking back, I mean, I wanted to make recordings.
Yeah.
I've been making recordings since I was like I think I made my first one when I was 7. You
Me
know,
too, I think.
you know, I've been making recordings since I was about 7. I've wanted to make records since then, and with each year that went by, I started on an old reel to reel that my dad gave me. You know, it was one of those reel to reels where you could record on one track,
Yeah.
and then you could play back that track and record on the other one.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, I have stories of me with my guitar, you know, memories of me with my guitar, and then, you know, me beating on like some pots and pans for the drums, you know, and you know, making those kind of recordings. And then those,
Yeah.
you know, then by the time I was about 11, I had one of those double cassette decks, you know, that could,
yeah.
you know, that you could dupe things with. And I
Yeah.
figured out, okay, I record on this one, then I dupe to that one, but while I'm duping, I add some stuff, and then I keep on doing that, and I can just keep on adding, building stuff, you know. And so by that time, I had a really basic drum machine that I borrowed from my friend. I had a guitar. I also had a bass. You know, so then, you know, those are the first ones I have. I have those cassettes still. So I have, you know, probably 7 years of those recordings, right? And then the next stage was my friend loaned me my first 4-track recorder. And you remember the 4-track recorders were cassette based, but you could access each track individually.
Yeah.
You know? And they were much more like a multi-track, you know, and so
that was a huge moment when those happened.
Yeah, and so I started working with those and producing, you know, more, you know, those had EQ and stuff on them. You know, I think by that time I had a reverb unit. You know,
Huge.
Yeah, I had a reverb unit, like a basic, like I think it was called an Alesis.
The microverb.
Microverb. I had a microverb. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had, you know, a little reverb unit, and you know, that was the beginning of me building a home studio. So by the time I was about 17, I met an entrepreneur. His name was Mike Joseph, and he was basically looking for a producer that, you know, he could build this company with, you know. And so he approached me and said, look, you know, I've got some money and I have an apartment. The apartment will be yours. And I'll buy you some studio equipment and you can have a studio in here, and then you're just going to produce music. So literally that's what happened. I moved out of my parents' home at 17 into this apartment flat in Stratford, which was about 3 miles away. And then this guy gave me, I don't know how much money he gave me, it wasn't much, but, you know, he gave me enough money that I could buy a mixing desk, an 8-track recorder, a few effects like a delay, a reverb, and a drum machine, a synth, you know, and what else did I have in there? A couple of microphones. Anyway, so that was my first home studio.
Wow. Age 17, yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually where I started producing the first Quite Sane projects.
And when you say 8-track at the time, was it 8-track reel to reel?
8-track reel to reel.
Yeah.
It was a Fostex R8.
Yeah, I had one of those too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a Fostex R8, and then I had I believe I had a Soundcraft, like, you know.
Oh yeah.
I think it was a Soundcraft 12-channel desk, you know. and I, you know, I bought some speakers. It was my first studio setup. It was like, you know, a little studio setup, and I could actually record stuff. I can mix stuff on there, and yeah, and so, you know, I produced a number of Quite Sane, which was the band that I had at the time, recordings there, you know, on that system. And then I also got into just producing other people's stuff. You know, I would start working with other artists that I knew in the area, and making records with them as well. You know, so that was my whole thing of getting into production. From there,
yeah,
I got a job at a studio. yeah, I got a job at a studio in London where I was actually like, in a real studio and could, learn about how they worked and everything. And then I started to get, I think I got a couple of production jobs with local London artists where they put me in the studio. They paid for the studio time, and all I had to do was produce their music,
Wow.
And I did a bunch of work like that.
How old were you then, Ant?
Probably 21, 22.
All right, like 4 years later or something. 4 or 5
Yeah,
years.
yeah. So I was working at, I don't remember the names of them, but all of the vast network of great studios.
Yeah.
And I worked in all of them.
Awesome.
Working on 2-inch tape, SSL boards. That's how I got to, really learn how to use all that stuff.
Yeah.
They had all this classic outboard, and
And great rooms, I'm sure.
great rooms, more stuff than I ever saw. But back in those days, I started out with an engineer, but back in those days, if you did your own engineering, you got the room for cheaper. Right. So I started doing late night sessions where I would just engineer the stuff myself.
Yeah.
And I did a bunch of records like that with UK artists. Yeah, and I think then when I moved to the US, which was in the late 90s, Rich Nichols of the Roots gave me money to buy a setup here, and my setup consisted of what was it, the Roland VS 8AE or whatever it was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still have mine actually.
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah. So a Roland VS 8AE, a pair of Mackie HR 24s, with the speakers, and a bunch of different outboard and stuff, and so I started out,
And a drum machine probably.
Yeah, drum machine. They gave me
Like an Akai or something.
What did I use in those days? No,
Wasn't the MPC.
I was using a sampler. I didn't actually have a drum machine. I had a sampler that I hooked up to the keyboard. Yeah, it was like an N-Sonic or something like that. But anyway, they gave me the loft in the house, right? Which was like, there was a room at the top of the house, and I could set all my stuff up there and make that my studio. And then
I was there one time because the Jazzy Fat Nasties
right
asked me and Jafar and some other people to come and play a concert, or just like something for some publishing people who came in, and we played some of their new tunes. And
was that on Rodman Street, or where was it?
I want to say it was like kind of like South Philly, not South Philly, but the other side of Broad Street.
Yeah,
in the 20s, maybe somewhere.
Oh no, that was a different place then. Okay, so I'm gonna get to that.
But you were upstairs that day, and because I was hearing someone creating some music, I'm like, what's going up there? Oh, Anthony's up there, doing some stuff. And
wow,
that was before I met you, actually.
Wow, that's crazy. Yes, I think that was Rodman Street.
Yeah,
that was Rodman Street. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So after I left Rodman Street, I moved to Fitzwater Street, 21st and Fitzwater. And me and my I don't think she was my wife yet, but my girlfriend at the time, we got this place. We got this 5-bedroom house.
Wow.
On 21st and Fitzwater.
That might have been the place I was at. For
$590 a month. It was insane. I was like, how much? $590, but it was a hellhole. So we got in there, we had to put down, we had to completely strip the place, put in a new kitchen, do the countertops, paint the whole thing, put in flooring, everything. It was a hellhole. So we completely redid the whole place. Yeah, and then we lived there for maybe, I would say 4 years or something like that. But the great thing about that, that was the first studio that I'd ever built, because I took 2 of those rooms and I turned it into a studio. I basically had one room, which was my control room. And then the other room, I went to Home Depot with my good friend Danaphonic, Dan, Dan Gaff. We went to Home Depot. We bought a garden shed. Like, it was like a 8 by 8 foot garden shed. Right. Then we built a platform on wheels. Like, we made a platform on wheels for isolation, and then we built the shed in the master bedroom on top of that.
A room in a room.
Yeah. Yeah. We built the shed on top of the platform in that room. And then, like, on the inside of the room, we put like parquet flooring, we put eggshell, like foam in the entire thing. And so that when you close the doors, like, we had the drum kit set up in there. So when you close the doors, right? When you close the doors, you couldn't hear anything.
Wow.
So we could play any time of day or night or whatever. I could record stuff and have complete isolation. The only problem was it was hot as hell, so you couldn't stay in there for long. So the crazy thing is, the Quite Sane record, The Child of Troubled Times, that is where the drums were recorded.
That was recorded in Philly?
Yeah.
Oh, I never knew that. I always thought that was recorded in England.
Nope. That was recorded in the US, and Sean Rickman was the drummer on that. So Sean Rickman was in that shed laying down those drum takes with the doors closed, with crates around him.
He's never forgiven you, probably.
With no shirt on. Like, in his skinnies, right? In that shed, laying down those drum takes.
That gives me a whole different take on the album now.
I actually forgot that was the case, but yes, that is where the entire album was recorded there. But in particular, the drums were recorded in that room. Now, some of it was recorded in the UK. I recorded the guitar and the vocals in the UK. I had a little mini portable setup that I would take around with me. So I took that to London and recorded the vocals, all of the vocals there, and I recorded the guitar there. I recorded some of the saxophone there.
Yeah, I had a feeling that some of it was done in London, but I thought all of it was done in London. So the core tracks and the core writing, the architecture of it was all done in Philly.
Oh, absolutely. In Philly.
That's so cool.
It was written there as well. And so the piano was recorded at Systems 2, though. Because obviously in those days I didn't have access to a great piano.
And Systems 2 is where?
Well, Systems 2 is nowhere anymore, but at the time, Systems 2 was in Brooklyn.
Oh yeah, okay. So I was going to say New York.
Yeah. So, but because I had done so much work at Systems 2, and I really trusted Joe Marciano, and I knew the sound of the piano there, I chose to record the piano there. So I flew Robert Mitchell to the US, the pianist, and he recorded the piano in that studio.
And that was when did that record happen? Was that also late 90s?
It came out in 2002. It was written in like 99 and recorded in 2000, something like that.
I have such great memories of that time here in Philly, 99, 2000, not just here, but around the world. I think there was just an amazing time for new music. I thought, just such new stuff was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Is that album still available? Can people buy that record anywhere?
Good question. So obviously, like many records, it went out of print. Yeah. And then about 5 years after that, I guess it went out of print around about 2008, something like that. And then I basically just didn't do anything with it for about 4 or 5 years. And then one day I was like, people seem to like this. Whenever I'm on tour, they're always like, so what started happening whenever I would go on tour in Europe with Steve, without fail, someone would come up to me and say, "Oh man, quite sing. Oh man, oh, you made this album. Do you have it?" And I would always say, "No." But then I'd watch Steve and at the time, yeah, Steve, I watched Steve just sell like 50 albums at each show. And I was like, I think I need to make some CDs. So yeah, so I went and tracked down the artwork and I made my own CDs. So yeah, it's available from me. I think CD Baby has it. Amazon
good.
maybe has some copies, but it's not very available. But the funny thing is that
But if anybody that knows you could get one from you?
sure, yeah.
Okay, so you have some. Great.
Yeah, I have hundreds. Yeah. So I mean, because you have to make a certain amount to get the CDs pressed. But anyway, so I've really been sleeping on it. I've been saying forever I'm going to create a website which I can sell them through so people can get them. But I haven't done it yet.
Put them on Bandcamp.
But I could do that too. So yeah, people trust me. People have been telling me all the things that you're telling me for years. I still haven't done it yet. But anyway, but this year is going to be the 20th anniversary. Sorry, next year is the 20th anniversary of the release of that album.
Wow.
And so I'm actually working on a project with J. Michael Harrison, who is going to put together this entire series around the subject of the Child of Troubled Times, which was the name.
Wow. That's so awesome.
Yeah, and so I'm making a sequel album for it, which will be like a continuation of that story and that whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah,
that really makes sense during these times too.
Right. It's also going to have education aspects that are going to be included. It's going to have the project that we're talking about doing. It's going to have multiple partners throughout the city that are involved with this idea of the Child of Troubled Times. Really expanding the idea more.
I love that idea.
What does it mean today?
Yeah.
So to go with that, I'm gonna write a new album, a sequel for that.
Beautiful. Well, talking about that album and talking about some of that history and production and stuff, made me think about Steve Coleman. And he got involved, or you got involved with him, or something a long time ago, like through the Roots, perhaps, or through Cosby or something like that. And that was when you were still in London, right?
Yeah. In fact, so when I was somewhere in the age between 17 and 19, I think it was 17 or 18, Rich Nichols, who basically was the patriarch, the brains behind the Roots.
Yeah.
Rich Nichols and Steve Coleman had this crazy idea that they were just going to go on a trip to Europe and visit these different cities and just check out the talent and see, what was happening. And so when they got to London, I think the way the story goes, Greg Osby had told Steve about me because I'd done a tour with Greg Osby, maybe, a year before that, a European tour. And they also asked someone at one of the clubs, I think it may have been a jazz cafe or Ronnie Scott's or something. They were like, who should we meet here? And they were like, oh man, well, you got to check out this dude, Anthony Tidd. And so at the time, I was the biggest fan of Steve Coleman. I mean,
wow.
I had his poster on my wall.
Wow.
Okay. Like I was really into his music and
you channeled him
into the idea of M-Bass. The idea of M-Bass was very exciting to me. This new group of young Black musicians who were basically moving the music forward, etc. This is my romanticized view of it. And I just pictured these people in America or whatever. Anyway, I was really into that idea and into Steve, and then one day I came home. Back in those days, you had those old answer machines that had a little micro cassette. Remember those? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I came home, pressed my answer machine, and this voice came on, and it was like, "Hey, this is Steve Coleman. Someone gave me your number. I'm reaching out. I'd like to come over and hang out with you and see what you're doing." Whatever, something like that. And so I came home, I listened to that thing on my answer machine. I was like, so immediately I called my one of my best friends, Richard, who was notorious for playing practical jokes. I called Richard up and I'm like, haha, Richard, that is really, really funny. Like, he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, one thing I didn't know you could do an American accent so well. That was a really good American accent, but I know it's you, and yeah, haha. And he was like, what are you talking about? I said, did you leave a message on my phone pretending to be Steve Coleman? He was like, no, but that's exactly what he would have said if he did do it. He's like, no, I didn't do it. And he started laughing. I was like, you did it. He's like, no, I didn't do it. I was like, okay, must be Eric. So I called my other best friend, Eric. These are two of the members of Quite Sane. So founder.
I've met Eric, right? The guitar player?
Eric Capapula, yeah.
Yeah.
And I called Eric up, who is also a prankster that would also do something like that. I called Eric. I was like, Eric, I know what you did. I know it was you. He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, you pretended to be Steve Coleman. You left him. Anyway, long story. Eric was like, it was not me. So I was like, maybe this is really Steve Coleman. So,
you couldn't get around the fact that it could have been him.
Right. So then I called the number back. He left the number. I called the number back, and it was a number to a hotel in West London somewhere. And, hi, can I speak to Steve Coleman? Okay, yeah, I'll patch you through. And it was Steve Coleman. I was like, what the hell? He said, yeah. So do you have some time tomorrow? I'm going to come through and bring my friend Rich with me. So anyway, the studio that I told you about that I had when I was 17,
yeah,
the flat, that's where they came.
Dude,
they came.
That day changed your whole life.
Yeah, they came, and I remember I played Steve, like some of my demos, that I had, like Quite Sane demos, played those to him. And then Rich was like, hey, I have some stuff I want to play you. And Rich pulled out a cassette. And he put this cassette on and he played it, and it was The Roots. But at the time, no one had ever heard of them.
Of course.
So I was listening to him. I was like, man, this is cool. And I remember saying to him, I was like, oh, man, so who did the drum programming? He said, no, that's a real drummer. I said, that's not a real drummer. He said, yeah, it's a drummer. It's this guy Amir from Philly. I was like, wow. Anyway, I don't know what song it was I heard. It was probably something from I know they did demos for Organics. So it's probably one of those songs.
Yeah.
But anyway,
what a day.
Yeah. So that's how I got connected with The Roots and Steve Coleman. About 6 months after that, they sent a plane ticket for me to come to the US. And I remember Steve picked me up at, like, I think it was JFK. And then we went back to his house for a few days and he taught me stuff, introduced me to a whole bunch of stuff, music, whatever. And then Rich came and picked me up from Steve's house, and then he took me to
Philly.
He took me to Philadelphia. Yeah. Wow. And that's when I met The Roots. Now what was I gonna say? So yeah, that's when I met The Roots. And I think there may be, Steve has told me, he has a video of this, but I may have done a concert with Steve on that trip. Steve may have taken me out to this, like, I can't remember where it was, but
When you first arrived?
we did a concert at a TV station. I may be getting this confused.
Yeah.
On one of my trips, because honestly, they brought me here a bunch of times.
You were going back and forth
Going
before you settled.
Yeah, I was going back and forth. And on one of those trips, there's a recording of me doing a concert with the Five Elements.
That's insane.
Which I never want to see because it was so bad.
Well, both of these areas are just amazing to me. Like Steve Coleman and the Roots, a singular day that affected your life forever, right?
Yeah, change it.
I love that, and so I'd like to talk just a bit about, ask you about the Steve Coleman side of it, because you know, it's like you channeled him or something. You manifested Steve into your life with that poster because he was in your mind, right? And you were listening to M-Bass, and so you started working with Steve, and still are, I believe, right? And that's been, wow, I don't know how many years that's been, 20 plus years or something. Is that right?
It's probably been 25 years.
25 years. And this is a large scope to try to answer, but
no, it's been longer. It's been longer, maybe 28, 29, 28 years or so. Yeah, something like that.
This is kind of a difficult question to answer because of the expansiveness of it. But, you know, can you talk a little bit about when you started working with Steve and some of the concepts that he had, which you were probably already exploring anyway, but what kinds of things did you start learning through working in M-Bass and working with Steve? And also, I know you recorded a whole bunch of records and you did a whole bunch of touring. So, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot there. But
yeah. So back in the day when you know, I remember I did a couple of concerts with Steve. I did one in I believe I did one in Germany or something like that. Which is when I also met Vijay Iyer. Vijay Iyer was in Steve created this group called, maybe it was called the Secret Doctrine or something like that. I can't remember what it's called. But it was me, Vijay Iyer,
wow,
and this guy called Sergio, this drummer, I can't remember his last name, Sergio or something. But anyway, we were in that band, and then Steve brought me to the US to do a Five Elements gig. You know, which is the gig I talked about, and I may have did a couple other things, but Steve basically said, "Look, you know, if you want to really do this, you've got to move to the US because, you know, I'm just being real. You know, you're going to have to rehearse, you're going to have to learn the music, you're going to have to be immersed in the scene and listen to all the cats that are doing it, and you can't do that from the UK." And, you know, at the time I had a whole life there. I had Quite Sane, my band, which I was the leader of. I had a girlfriend, you know, that I was quite into. And I had an apartment. I had a whole life there.
Yeah.
And I was like, I
wow.
can't. So I was like, no, I can't move.
That's so heavy.
Yeah. And so what happened is, so then I went back to the UK, and I stopped working with Steve for maybe, I would say 3 or 4 years. And I'll give you the short version, but there was one concert that I did with a local promoter in London. I used to have this beautiful 1964 BMW 1502 that was canary yellow. Beautiful vintage BMW, loved it. Anyway, the reason why I tell you about this, I lived in a place called Crystal Palace at that point, which is at the top of a hill. And I was so broke that I had to roll my car down the hill and time it so that I could get to the gas station without having to push it again.
Wow.
And so I rolled my car down the hill and then made it to this gas station, you know, and was there. And then I went to the guy who worked in the gas station. I think I kind of knew. And I was like, look, like, I don't have any money. I need to put like 5 pounds of gas in my car so I can make it to this gig. And he was like, okay. I said, I'm going to do the gig. No, listen, this is crazy because in those days you could do stuff like that. This is crazy. He's like, I was like, look, as soon as I return from the gig, I'm going to have money, and then I'm going to bring it. I'm going to pay you, right? And he said, okay, leave something. And I said, well, what? And he looked at my watch. I had a nice Swatch watch at the time. He said, leave your watch here. So I left in my watch. I filled up my car with gas, and then I drove to the Barbican. No, it wasn't the Barbican. The Queen Elizabeth Hall. I drove to the Queen Elizabeth Hall where I did this gig. I think the artist that I played with was Louis Mahalo, who was like a pretty big South African free drummer at the time.
All right.
We did this gig. The gig went well. The promoter's name was this guy called B.E., who was kind of a promoter in London at the time. Did the gig. At the end of the gig, I was supposed to get paid £100 or something like that, and he only gave me 50.
Oh.
And I was like, dude, do you understand that I just literally like left my watch at a gas station to come here and make this gig, and you're not even paying me what I'm supposed to get? And I was so upset, just completely broken and depressed after that gig. I went back, drove back to the gas station, gave this guy his money, gave him an extra £5. I gave him £10, gave my watch back. I went back to my apartment where I believe at that point the rent hadn't been paid in 2 months, whatever. And I was like, I'm done. So I called Rich Nichols. I called and I called Steve Coleman. I was like, I'm coming to America.
Wow.
And that's why I left the UK.
Amazing.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Steve. Yeah. So once I got back in Steve's band, man, I had a complete education in that band. I mean, I went to school for music. I went to 2 different schools. I went to Goldsmiths and I went to Thurrock College of Music out in the countryside. And I studied there, but to be honest, my real music education happened when I joined Steve Coleman's band. I mean, I didn't know anything before I got there.
Yeah.
Like nothing, really.
Yeah.
So everything from feel to music theory to harmony to everything. I learned all of that stuff as a result of being in that band. Back in those days, tours would be on tour buses, right? And so we would do these long tours that would last for 4 to 6 weeks. This is back in the day when tours could last that long, and in between the cities, like these tours covered the whole of Europe. So we had some very long drives, and in between the cities, we would just sit on the tour bus, and some people will watch DVDs, but Steve would like hold these informal schools at the back of the tour bus where he would teach people things,
Wow.
So I remember on one tour, Steve taught me how to program in Max,
Max MSP.
Yeah.
Wow.
I knew nothing about. I just bought a computer and he taught me over the course. Steve is a like really amazing computer programmer. I mean, amazing.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Amazing to the point where SimNet and Earcam, which are 2 of the greatest programming technology houses in the world, both like invited him to do long and extensive projects in their facilities. He's like a really great programmer, and he was taught to program, I believe, by George Lewis.
Okay.
Yeah. Another great programmer. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So basically, Steve taught me how to program in Max. That's how I learned. Yeah, over one of those tour bus things. But over other ones, he taught me about harmony and or symmetry or rhythm or all of these different things.
I mean, that's years and years, right? Years and years of stuff.
And then at a certain point, we started doing these workshops and master classes. Because Steve would do these residencies. So for instance, we did a residency in I believe this is in 2003. We did a residency in Montpellier where we were there for probably 2 or 3 weeks, and we taught classes every day to the musicians and people that were
For 2 or 3 weeks you were there.
Yeah. So
Wow.
so it you know, and what would happen though is while I was at those workshops, obviously, you know, I'd have to sit there and listen, and so I would learn there as well. This was like being in the world's best university,
Yeah.
but getting paid for it.
And yeah, but better.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and then, you know, so not just Steve though, I also learned a lot from other musicians, you know.
Sure.
And yeah, that was my real education though.
Man.
So I learned, you know, asking me what did I get from it? I mean, everything, you know.
Everything, right?
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. And that, and as we were talking before we went online, you know, learning never ends.
Right.
We just keep learning, you know, and even relearning, you know. I know for myself, like I forget everything I learn, you know, and it's somehow there. And then I'll go back and start reading about it again. I'm like, oh yeah, look at it. And then, you know, I don't know. It's in us somehow. It's in our subconscious. But, you know, it's like just great work with Steve. And, you know, it's like we haven't even touched upon your bass playing, you know, which is what this is all about, really. And it's kind of like the vehicle, one of the vehicles that got attention when you were in London was really your bass playing first. And I know now recently, I don't know how recently because time is a blur to me, but you adopted the 6-string fretless bass. And
right.
Prior to that, you were playing fretted basses, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a funny story. So one of those gigs that I told you about, you know, I will play Queen Elizabeth Hall, and you know, one of those gigs where I played Queen Elizabeth Hall, this guy came up to me. I had a headless, like kind of a Steinberg knockoff kind of bass, and this guy came up to me and he was like, "Wow, I really enjoyed the show. Nice." And I think he said something like, "When you're ready for a real instrument, you know, give me a call." Okay. And that was this guy. He was this German guy that had moved to the UK called Martin Peterson, right? And he owned this company called Say Bass, like 6 in Spanish, and he owned a bass shop called The Gallery, which had all of the boutique basses that were around, you know, and it's still there today. And so he made me my first 6-string. And literally, it wasn't even, I didn't even want a 6-string, right? Because I was playing 4-string at the time. So he was just like, so, you know, when he was making me the bass, he's like, so, all right, so how many strings do you want? You want a 5-string? And I was like, 5-string? Yeah, he said, yeah, because you could get the low B. And I was like, low B? yeah, 5-string would be cool. And he's like, or 6. I was like, wait. There's a string below that. He's like, no, you can have a high C and a low B. He's like, 6-string. I was like, okay, I'll take a 6-string. That's how I got it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your luthier actually pushed you into playing a 6-string bass.
Yeah, he built me a 6-string bass.
Wow.
And I played that bass. That bass was such an incredible instrument. It still is. I still have it.
Yeah.
But it's such an incredible instrument that I literally played that bass for 20 years. God. I didn't buy another bass or play another bass in any band for that time. Only that bass.
I know that bass.
Yeah, and what happened is one day I went to visit his store to take that bass to have some services done on it, because obviously I've been playing it for 20 years and it needed a tune-up and I hadn't done anything. So I took it there. And he was like, "Oh, so it's about time for you to have another instrument." And I was like, "Yeah, another instrument." He was like, "Well," and then so he has this room. I don't know if he still has it, but at the time he had this room, and it was about the size of the studio, and it was just literally from floor to ceiling. It was just slats of wood stacked.
Yeah,
it was a drying room where he dries the wood or whatever, right? And he pulled out this piece of wood And he was like, I found this on the street. This was a coffee table, but I've always wanted to make a bass out of it. Would you let me make you a bass out of this piece of wood? And I was like, it looks beautiful. And he showed me, he had all these details and stuff. I was like, sure. And then he said, he said, so what do you want? I said, oh, well, I'd like, something like what I have. And he said, oh, but you already have that. Like, so I was like, okay, well, I have been into a fretless. I would like a fretless. And he's like, oh yeah, fretless, yeah. He said, so 6-string fretless. And I was like, a 6-string fretless? He's like, yeah, I can make a 6-string fretless. I was like, wow. And then he was like, okay, and there's this new pickup system where there are no pickups. It's just like it's this light thing. It has these lights and it figures out the frequencies, like this new system, this pickup system. I could put that in there. I was like, okay. And he's like, and I was like, he's like, why don't we have the neck go all the way down to almost to the bridge, so it's more like an upright. I was like, okay. And he's like, and why don't we connect instead of have a single cutaway? Why don't we have this connected to the neck, because that'll be better for vibration. I was like, okay. And he's like, and we could put some chambers inside the bass so it can get more of an acoustic sound and that kind of stuff. And I was like, so that's how I got the new bass made.
And there's another person that's totally changed your life.
Yeah, exactly. My bass playing would not be what it is without Martin Peterson, who made that bass.
Wow.
I was very lucky to stumble upon, I think he's the best luthier in the UK.
Wow.
Easy. I mean,
is your bass handy? Is it there next to you or no?
It's in the other room. It's in the live room.
Okay. Well, if it was at hand, I would say you should show that bass, because it's
okay. Let me go get it.
Well, anyway, I think it's worthwhile that everybody sees this bass, because it's beautiful, and these two basses that this luthier built for Ant, which I didn't know the story, that's changed his life as a bass player. But this is a 6-string fretless, which
this is it.
It's not only is it an incredible instrument, but what a work of art it is. I mean, wow, that's just one of the most beautiful instruments I've ever seen, and sonically, in your hands, Ant, it is, it's truly something very, very, very special.
Yeah, this was a coffee table.
That was a coffee table.
Yeah.
I love the neck
on the street.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really something special.
Yeah. I had him add a magnetic pickup. You can see there's a magnetic pickup as well, but the main pickup is here in the bridge.
All right.
And the magnetic pickup allows, it was kind of a backup, because I imagined some situations where the pickup in the bridge was giving me more. The pickup in the bridge was actually giving me more of a very acoustic sound, and I wanted to have a little bit of an electric sound in there as well.
Yeah.
So putting that magnetic pickup in there allowed me to go between the two.
And when did you get that bass? You've had it what, 5 years or more or less?
I think I got it 5 years ago at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was quite a transition too, wasn't it? Learning to play that.
Yeah, it was. I would say I had a little advantage because I actually started on violin.
All right.
Yeah. And so the idea of intonation and that stuff, I worked with early on, because you have to have intonation if you're going to play violin. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. You know what I mean? So it wasn't as hard for me to adapt. And also I played fretless when I was younger as well. I had a fretless bass that I got stuff together on.
I always love to ask this question because it's just great to hear the answer to, and that is, who are some of your favorite bass players?
That's a very difficult question to ask.
I know it is. It's a hard one to answer.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, man. I mean, I love, Charles Mingus.
Yeah.
you know,
Wow.
Oscar Pettiford,
Yeah.
you know, James Jameson, is really one of my favorites. Um, I went for a period where I was checking out a lot of Jocko as well, you know, like most bass players, checked out a lot of him. Who else? Man, there's so many. There's just, you know, Jimmy Garrison
No.
for some stuff. I
Yeah.
love, you know, I love his bass playing. You know, the way he sounded in Coltrane's band. You know, I love that.
Yeah.
Um, Man, just too many.
I mean, there's so many you can't even think of them all, really, you know.
Yeah, there's like I would in the realm of favorite, I would need to have at least 50 people.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally. Right?
50 people at some point I've checked out.
They were that were influential to you.
Yeah, you know, I like, for instance, Rich Brown. I love Rich
Oh my
Brown.
God.
And Anthony Jackson. I really love Anthony Jackson's playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could keep going. There's lots of great, really great bass players that I like, you know. So
You know, we heard the Steve Coleman side of things, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you then the flip side, which of that day that changed your life with Rich Nichols, and that's the Roots. And when you started working with the Roots, what actually transpired in those early days?
it's so in the beginning when I met the Roots, I met Rich first, but when I later met the band, I think I met them in London first. They moved to London for about 2 years, and I'm mixed up whether that was after I met him in Philly or before. Anyway, and then at some point, our bands started. You know, we did a few double dates at clubs. I think we did the Jazz Cafe a couple of times and a couple of clubs where we would do back-to-back shows. And then we did our first recording together for Talking Loud.
I remember that label.
Yeah, Giles Peterson's label. And so Giles put out a Roots EP, and on that EP, I produced one of the songs, or you know, we worked together on one of the songs, which is Worldwide. There's a Worldwide London Groove, and yeah, I worked on that with the Roots. That was the first time I worked with them. And then later on, when I moved to the US, I was basically brought here by Rich Nichols and Steve, and so I ended up living with Rich Nichols at Robin Street.
All right.
Yeah, that's where he lived, and so I lived in the house with him, and you know, part of that period and part of that house was just this music community. So you know, as a result of being in that community, you know, Erykah Badu would be there, Coleman would be there, you know, Tom Ali would be there, and you know, just different things. Every week there was someone else coming through. On top of that, Sigma Sound, you know, we were at Sigma Sound every day, and working on various projects, you know, Roots albums and other people's albums and different things that were happening, you know, so I kind of got immersed in the whole Philly scene that way. The group, a group that the Roots were producing at the time, well, Rich was producing at the time, was a group called the Jazzy Fat Nasties, right? One of them eventually became my girlfriend and then my wife, but so that also involved, you know, lots and lots of work with the Roots and different people, because you know, through the Jazzies, through my connections with the Jazzies, you know, yeah. So I would say that important things from that side of things were one, you know, really getting to be part of the Philly hip hop scene in those
Yeah.
days, which eventually became the Philly neo soul scene. You know, the Five Spot,
Yeah.
the Black Lily, and all that kind of stuff. I was very much involved in all that kind of stuff.
And Silk
And
City too, you know.
it's Silk City as well, yeah. And then, you know, eventually, on the other side, that really fed my studio side, uh,
Yeah.
because Steve was more about, Steve was more about the music and the creative side of the music. But, you know, on the other side, you know, through the roots, I got to meet Bob Powers and
Oh
watch
man.
him work, and Tony Mansobrati and all of these other people, and see how, you know, work in the studios where they worked and see how they set stuff up. Dave Ivory, you know,
Wow.
at Sigma, you know,
Yeah.
you know, see, oh, how does he mic a drum kit? What kind of pre's does he use? You know,
Wow.
how does he make the compression work? So that was an entire education on that side of things. You know,
Wow. Yeah.
of course, John Smeltz as well.
Yep.
Jeff Chestek. You know,
Yeah.
These are all people that I met. You know, Larry Gold. These are all people that I met through the roots and got an education in the area. You know?
All legends, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all of the stuff I learned about studio construction, I learned from, you know, being at Larry Gold's.
Yeah.
John Smells from Larry.
Yeah.
Jeff, you know, which became important, you know, with this venture, you know, building a studio. You know, I had to learn how to isolate things, you know, and windows and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
The learning never ends.
Right. How to wire a patch bay, you know. I learned from Jeff. Watching Jeff wire stuff, you know.
Jeff is the best.
Jeff is the best. He is so, I was going to say he's undervalued, but he's not. He's so valued that he never has any time.
That's right.
I've been saying forever, I've got to give him a call and see how he's doing.
Yeah, we need to do that and actually do a hang. That would be great. Now that we can hang, we should hang with Jeff. That would be a beautiful day.
Yeah.
Man, you know, this has been an amazing conversation. We've already been chatting for about 90 minutes, and you know, it's very easy to do this because it's so great to chat with you about all these things. But
Right.
I think the last question that I might have for now, because I think there should be a part 2 at some point, you know, but the last question for now is, what are you doing now? You know, as we're opening up, I know part of that is you're getting your studio up and running. You're doing a lot of producing and projects down there. And I think you have some new upcoming projects that are besides your part 2 of your Quite Sane album. There's some other things too, right?
Oh, absolutely. So I've really been trying to dive back in on being more creative and producing more work as an artist.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of projects that I'm doing in that respect. One that I'm working on with Ursula Rucker. I'm writing a string quartet which features spoken word, and it's basically a project which is dedicated to, you know, telling the stories of some people that died, you know, as a result of police violence.
Yeah.
And it's presented as a book, you know, and an album, you know. So we're working on that actively. I'm very excited to finish that very soon. I think, you know, we're within 2 weeks of being finished.
That's gonna be beautiful.
Yeah, and then the other thing I've just finished working on, Black Thought, just is about to put out a memoir, which is called 7 Years.
Wow.
And it's basically telling his story of his life, you know, starting at 7 years and going all the way up to whatever age he is now, right? And so Audible has been doing these series of audio books with music behind them.
That's awesome.
So it's crazy. It's like a movie,
Yeah.
but without visuals. And so I scored the whole thing.
Wow.
You know, which is really great because I got to uh, just pull from everything. I wrote some stuff for a string quartet. I wrote some stuff for a big band. You know, I combined the two on some songs. You know, I also recreated some classic root songs. You know, and the song that I told you about, the first song that I ever did with them, I recreated that as well. In fact,
Wow.
I based the entire thematic material of the whole thing on that song. You know,
Did you record everything in your studio there?
everything's recorded here. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And when does that come out?
I'm not entirely sure. I think it's
Okay.
coming. It's coming out in the summer, but I don't know what the exact date is.
Right. So pretty soon.
Yeah, I just finished mastering it and sent it to them
Wow.
yesterday. Yeah, so
I can't wait to hear that.
I'm excited about that. Another project that I'm also working on, also with Black Thought, is a musical called Black No More.
Wow.
So there was this pretty amazing book that was written in the 1920s called Black No More, which is about this mad scientist who comes up with a way that you can turn any black person into a white person. Right.
1920 it was?
Yeah. So this is the premise of the book, right? And it's such an incredible story. But anyway, Tariq and the new group came up with this idea to produce a musical based on that. And so Tariq pulled me in, and and we wrote the music together for it. So that that's, let's put it this way. I didn't realize the scope of what I was dealing with until we'd already been working on the project for 3 years. And at that point, Tariq started to mention the names of some of the people that were involved, and let's put it this way. I am the least known person. Everyone involved in that thing is a major player.
Yeah.
Oscars and Grammys and just crazy stuff,
Beautiful.
Yeah, we did before the pandemic, we did a preview of it at the New Group's theater in New York on 42nd Street off Broadway. And it's a pretty big theater. It's just like seats like maybe 1,500 people, 1,000 people, and it was packed.
Wow.
And it was packed with all industry people.
Wow.
And they were all extremely excited to see it on Broadway or whatever. Yeah. So it's going to be very big.
Well, those 3 projects you just mentioned are all huge in my mind. It's like, wow. Mm-hmm. I can't wait to check them all out, and I'm sure you'll be keeping everyone informed about them on, I guess, Facebook and stuff like that,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we'll look forward to that. And it's been so great to hang.
Yeah, it's been really great to hang. I mean, we do this anyway, but just not on camera.
I know, but when we do this, somehow we can get into a different flow.
Absolutely.
And as I've been noticing with doing these searching for sparks, they're special, and I'm glad they become like little mini documents or a little window in to some people, and I love the fact that we could share this time today. It was great.
Yeah, thank you so much for creating this platform, and I'm very happy to be a part.
Oh man. Well, anyway, have a great day. I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Okay, man.
And take care.
Take care.
And everybody, thanks for checking it out. Searching for Sparks along with Anthony Tidd. I'm Tim Motzer, and be sure to sign up for the subscription to the YouTube page. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.